Hi, I'm Anna McEwen, and this is The Epic Narrative. And now, my dad, Bob Switzer.
All right, I kind of left you hanging. We last week, but I didn't want to go for 2 hours last week. Just cause I could have gone 2 hours. I'd just rather take a break, come back the next day. For me, the next day. I know for you, the next week. And let's continue with this with what's happening here. So we have this civil war. That's this potential civil war. It's definitely a royal family civil war. This is a royal battle. This is a feud at the at the lowest level. This is a family feud. I know it takes on a whole new whole new level here. We call it Family Feud. Clearly not hosted by Steve Harvey. It's clearly not funny. David is set up in this small armed or walled village, walled city, and people are bringing in resources and bringing in men. So in chapter 18 of 2 Samuel, we see David mustered the men who were with him and appointed over them commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. So clearly we have several thousands of men here at this point. Now he started out with 600, all of whom were palace guards. So they were highly trusted, highly valued, well-trained individuals. He also has 1/3 of the command of Joab, a third under the command of Joab's brother Abishai, and a third under Ittai, the Gittite. So at the very least, we probably have 3,000 soldiers at this point. But it also, he divides them up, a third, and a third. And then out of that, they divide up into commanders of probably 500, which is basically what we determined back in the day about Uriah, that he was a commander of 500. So these are guys that are well known and trusted and have reputation. I want you to know that the people who showed up here weren't random farmers and merchants from around the countryside saying, "Hey, David, we're with you because you're awesome." These were well-trained leaders and warriors, probably many of them experienced. And when they heard that Absalom had started this coup, and they heard that David had left Jerusalem, they went looking for David. And eventually, of course, word got out. I mean, not right away. Obviously, Absalom, searched for him that night, didn't find him. He kind of knew that David would find a place to reside. That wasn't an issue. The issue was he wanted to put together an army big enough that regardless of who decided to support David and wherever David was hiding or setting up shop, it wouldn't matter because his army would be so much bigger and so much more powerful that regardless of David's strategies and experience, Absalom would prevail, and it would be a great victory. So in pride and in arrogance, I have this visual of Absalom absolutely decked out for this battle. Now he's already centered himself while he's waiting, probably for several weeks, maybe up to a month, for all the troops to gather from all over the country. Some of them are coerced, some of them are come voluntarily, but he's putting together a massive amount of men, massive amount, so that it looks overwhelming. It's part of this is psychological warfare, and we even do that today. We don't in military strength. Rumors are released. Information is released as to the equipment we have or the ability of our weapons, so that enemies hear about it and they think, man, like if we go up against them, like they have bombs that will literally, recognize our fingerprints and chase us through the world or whatever. Like we let people know how big we are. We let people know how powerful we are. We let rumors slide out, information slide out about our weaponry and our numbers, our mobility. We overwhelm people. And, I think back to the Desert Storm, right? We went in there, and I know, politics aside, we went in there mostly because Saddam Hussein had let rumors become verifiable information that he had nuclear weapons of mass destruction, dirty bombs. And it turns out he probably didn't have any of it. He had enough trickery to make it to let out enough evidence to make it look like these things could exist. But in reality, he didn't. And unfortunately, then it turned into a political quagmire. But the initial battle, right, was overwhelming. It was overwhelming because he did not have the troops he said he had. They did not have the weapons that he said they had, and they did not have the bombs that he said he had. But he let those rumors fly because it's intimidating, theoretically. Now, the same thing, that same mentality is still in this time period for Absalom. He wants it to look massive. He knows most of the people that are showing up are not actually warriors. I mean, they're willing to fight, but they're not battle trained. And they're going to follow Absalom. And I think Absalom, because of his pride and because of the plan that he's enacting, like he wants to look the part. If you could picture the most impressive battle gear of the day, like he's going to wear it. And remember, he's gorgeous. Remember, he is head to toe the best looking guy in the world. He is not going to wear something that doesn't accentuate his beauty. He's going to make sure that it's something that is perfect for who he thinks he is. So he's preparing his battle armor. Like you can kind of picture, he's got military strategy meetings going on, and they're trying to figure out who's going to be in charge of this 1,000, who's going to be in charge of that 1,000. And of course, Absalom's not a great leader. He's not a military leader. He's a calculated, shrewd, intelligent, prideful man. And so he's having these meetings, and politics are being played. It's not diplomatic, it's political. So people are being put in charge of things that probably shouldn't be put in charge of things because they're saying the right words, or they have made promises in the right way. And Absalom, if this was a movie, I picture Absalom kind of distracted most of the time because he wants to make sure he looks good. He wants to make sure that in this strategy, he looks like he's leading the battle. He wants to look like the hero. He wants to be the king. He wants to be undeniably better than his father, which of course he can't do in one battle because David had his, this long history. He's a legend. It'd be like a rookie trying to prove in one game that they are better than a legend. And I'm from New England, so we were overwhelmed, right? We had 20 years of Tom Brady. And I cannot tell you the number of preseasons or the first 3 or 4 weeks of a season where there was at least 2, if not 3 rookies that were being compared to Tom. He's greater than Tom Brady. This guy's going to be greater than Tom Brady. And yet for 20 years here in New England, nobody came close because as the season wore on, the rookies would fall by the wayside. Now, do I think he'll be surpassed? I don't know, man. He's still kicking. He's not even here anymore. So I don't know, but I suppose probably eventually. But there are some really good quarterbacks that come and go. And David's the same sort of way as far as a leader goes. There were some really good leaders that popped up, really good warriors that popped up. But in the end, they couldn't sustain. David's been around for years. He's been king now for over 20 years. He's won multiple battles, multiple little, or insurrections. No, what do I want to say? Incursions into his borders. People that are trying to intimidate him, and David shuts them down. He shuts them down. Not that he's on the battlefield anymore, but it's it's impressive. And Absalom's not going to overtake his dad in one fell swoop, but he wants to. Like, that's the arrogant part of him. And I think he's really concerned that he looks good, that when the history books are written, he's the one who is sustained. Later on in the chapter, I think it's later in this chapter, we see that, that he literally has already, even before he took over the kingdom, he had already had made. Why are you stuttering today, Bob? My gosh, will you put together a sentence without going, Whew, man, you're driving me crazy today. He put a monument to himself in the valley, in the Monument Valley. He built a big old tower in the Monument Valley, and he named it Absalom's Monument. I mean, that's how that's how arrogant this guy is. He's like, listen, I'm not married. I don't have any children, so I need to be remembered. I need somebody to remember me. I need my story to be written. That reminds me of that show, that musical Hamilton. Man, what a brilliant musical. I know I'm not telling anybody anything new, but wow. Okay, sorry. David gets all his men together. They are kind of marching, or they are assembling outside the city, or just inside the city, right around the city gate. And they're putting things together, and David said, I'm going out with you. And the commanders, his three mighty men there, two of them, of course, are his nephews. They're like, David, you can't come with us. He's like, why not? Like, I want to be there. Like, this is my son coming up against me. I want to be there. I want to make sure it's done right. I want to make sure no one kills this kid. That's really what his heart is. And these guys know, listen, David, their number one goal is to kill you. We are vastly outnumbered. And if by chance we have to run, if by chance we have to retreat, they're not going to care if they kill 10,000. It's not going to matter. You are worth 10,000 of us. They're not really even going to chase us. If we have to run, the only thing they're running after is you. You need to stay back here at the city, where at the very least, the gates can be shut and you can survive a little bit longer. We can all get back here. Some of us can get back here and protect you. So David, he reluctantly says yes. And I think that this is kind of taking place in front of all the men. And David says, you know what? I'll do whatever seems best to you. So it says in verse 4, so the king stood beside the gate while all the men marched out in units of hundreds and of thousands. So, hundreds, probably, like I said, between probably 500s and then thousands. So they were however you want to, whatever name you put on that, battalions and groups and whatever. Then they're all assembled there, and he commands Joab, Abishai, and Ittai. He says, be gentle with the young man Absalom for my sake. All the troops heard the king given this order concerning Absalom to each of the commanders. So this is a public display on David's part. Don't kill the young man Absalom. Now, it doesn't mean Absalom's a young man, like he's 18 years old. He's not. He's probably 30. But David's saying, don't kill my son. Don't kill my son. Be gentle with him. I get it. He's leading an army against you. I know battles. I understand warfare. But I don't want you to kill him. This is going to turn into hand-to-hand combat. We have a strategy. Our strategy is to divide, is to confuse, is to break down their organization in such a way that it becomes a ton of one-on-one battles, 5-on-5 battles, 3-on-2 battles. Our goal is to divide them, confuse them, not give them any central command. That's what our goal is. I know it could get confusing, but I'm telling you, if you run into my son, do not kill him. That's what he's saying. And he says it loud enough, all the troops hear it. Not just the commanders, all the troops. So David's army marched out into the city to fight Israel, and the battle took place in the forest of Ephraim. Now, this is like right up David's alley. Like, this is, like, you can't find a better battleground for David to take on an army that vastly outnumbers him. Joab and Abishai have fought multiple battles on this level. They've been involved in multiple scenes where they are theoretically outnumbered, outgunned, outmanned, and yet they know if we can get them in a forest, if we can put them in a rocky area where there's going to be multiple ravines and multiple hills and start breaking down their organization, we can kill them because we are better fighters. We're better warriors. And that's exactly what the plan was. They got him into the forest of Ephraim. This shows Absalom's lack of leadership, his lack of awareness. He is not a warrior. He doesn't understand what's going on. He sees them drawing them into the forest and he thinks this is awesome. We'll kill them all. David draws them into the forest and he thinks they're way too big. They're not mobile. My men are mobile. They're smaller units. They're already divided. They have excellent commanders and leaders that will, move them around the oncoming troops in such a way that the oncoming troops aren't going to know what hit them. They're not going to realize that all of a sudden they're separated from the other 500 people that they came into the forest with. And now it's just a few of them and a whole lot of David's men, and then they're dead. It's pretty awesome. It's brilliant. And the battle spread out over the whole countryside. This is fascinating. What did David do? What did Joab and Abishai and Ittai do? They did exactly what they were supposed to do. They divided, they spread everybody out, because as you get separated, they would, the Absalom's army would run further to the flank, would try to get around what the quote army of David. And the army of David would just keep letting them go. Like they just kept spreading them out. And it said that the forest swallowed up more that day than the sword. There were cliffs and ravines that these guys would fall off of. They didn't know where they were. They came from all over the country, from the north to the south. They hadn't been in this area. David had. David knew exactly what he was doing. Absalom didn't have a clue. Absalom was disoriented. He was out of his league. He was overwhelmed with the responsibility. He wanted to ride in to victory, and he literally ends up riding by himself. He doesn't even have a surrounding group of men that, quote, would never leave his side. So effective was David's plan that Absalom ends up completely isolated, completely disoriented, riding through the forest as fast as he can. He has no idea where he's going. He doesn't have a central command. He doesn't know how to get back to it if he did. Like the sense of what Absalom's going through right now is panic, terror, fear. Literally everything that you get when you don't center yourself with God. But that's not what I guess it's a small point if you want to take it. Absalom's riding. All he's trying to do is find a way out. And as the mule went under thick branches of a large oak tree. I don't know if you've ever seen these. I call them scrub oaks. Like here in the Northeast, we have oak trees that tend to grow straight up. Like oak trees are considered, really good lumber. They're hardwood. They burn for hours. Like if you can get wood for your fireplace or for your furnace and it's, oak, you know that you're not going to have to keep putting wood on the fire. Once you get a good bed of coals going, you throw on some oak logs, you're going to be good for hours and it's going to be hot. So oak is different in different parts of the world. Here in the Middle East, I would what I call scrub oak. They tend to grow thick and branchy rather than straight up. So he's riding through the forest. There's no path really for him to ride. He's riding probably on some random trail that was there from wildlife, a deer path, something along that line. He's, again, disoriented. He's filled with terror. He's in a panic. He's riding fast in unfamiliar territory, and he's looking behind him and he's looking beside him because David's men seem to be everywhere. Like, again, you can picture this in a movie scene, right? It seems to be foggy because that's the way his mind is. It's fogged up. There's dust, there's clanking and banging of swords, and there's groans of men that have been stabbed. There's men who are running and just running away already. And they're yelling for their brothers, they're yelling for their friends. Hey, come with me, like we're leaving, like get out. Run. Absalom knows that his army is falling apart. He's seeing that his plan is falling apart. He's realizing that life is not going to go as he had hoped. He's thinking, we may lose this. If I lose this battle, I've lost the kingdom because I'm not even in the capital city. Maybe he's even thinking about Ahithophel's advice and thinking, I should have went after Dad to begin with. I should have let Ahithophel kill him. Like now I'm not even going to be king. All of this, the amount of panic and fear and disillusion and disorientation that was inside Absalom. Like we can't understate this. The weakness of his leadership is like completely overwhelming. The puffed up image that he has created for years about what an awesome leader he would be, what an amazing, judge, king he would be. It's all crashing down around him. I can't understate this. I really can't. If I was doing the movie, this scene would you just build up to the scene because this is just ridiculous in the negative, foggy activity that's going on within Absalom while he's riding as fast as he can through the forest. And in this oak tree, in this scrub oak, his hair gets caught up. And there's lots of theories as to how this happens, so make up your own. But in my mind, I think one of the things he had as part of his beautiful ornamental armor. Again, I don't think it was practical. I think it was designed to look good. Part of it was, I think he had remember his hair, he'd cut it once a year and it weighed 5 pounds, which is a lot. That's thick hair. I have a feeling that it was pulled back and up on top of his head. And it probably had some sort of gold wrapping that kind of formed a crown, but also as a hairpiece. And he basically had like a fountain of hair that came off the top of his head. So when he rode, it looked like almost like the mane of a horse. And it would flow behind him because it was so long and thick. But that's what get caught up in a tree. It gets wedged. I don't know if just the hair got caught up in the tree because it was a thick tree and he went to duck under, or if the twisty golden hairpiece got wedged between a couple branches. but I imagine it happened quickly. He's probably, like I said, looking behind him, looking to the side of him, hearing the noises of warfare, hearing the wounded cry out, knowing that his troops are falling apart. Even as he speaks, he's riding into what he hopes is a clear area, something where at least the battle isn't raging. And he looks up, and before he can duck, his hair is caught. His head is caught. And the mule keeps running. And he's hanging there in the tree. And one of the men realizes what had happened, and he goes to Joab, which, again, remember now, this takes time. He didn't call him, but evidently Joab's men were in that area. So he probably wasn't too far away. Probably 3-4 minutes, the guy runs, and he goes to Joab, and he says, Absalom is hanging in an oak tree. And Joab looks at him and says, what, you saw him? Why didn't you kill him? I mean, he puts it in a little more words. He's like, why didn't you strike him to the ground right there? Why did you kill him? You saw Absalom and he was just hanging there? Why didn't you kill him? I would have given you 10 shekels of silver. I would have given you a warrior's belt. Like I would have given you a promotion is what he's saying. If you killed Absalom, you would have been promoted. Why are you coming to tell me this? And the man looked at him like I'm sure he's shocked. He's looking at his commander. And he goes, I don't care if you gave me 1,000 shekels in my hands. I wouldn't kill the king's son. I heard the king tell all of you commanders, you and everybody, that we were supposed to protect Absalom for the sake of David. He gave us an order and he asked us personally. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put my life in jeopardy, because eventually the king's going to find out. He says nothing is hidden from the king. You even probably would have kept your distance from me. Like you would have let me kill him and then you would have just kept your mouth quiet. No, he said, no, it's not worth it. I know the king gave the order. Now this is pretty bold to do in front of Joab. It's probably one-on-one, but Joab knows he's right. So Joab doesn't strike this guy down. He looks at this guy, and in essence, he's called to order. He's called to honor the words of David. And Joab has a choice to make. Joab's told, right? And Joab has to decide, what do I do? Well, I don't think it took him long. He says, you know what? I'm not going to wait like this for you. So he took 3 javelins in his hands and he runs over to Absalom. He grabs 3 javelins and he's got men that follow him, right? Joab doesn't do battle one-on-one with nobody around him. I'm sure he does battle one-on-one, but as a commander, he has, probably 10 guys that never leave his side. I'm sure they battle on their own, but they always keep an eye on Joab. And if Joab starts to run, they run. So Joab grabs some weapons and he starts running into the forest, and he finds Absalom hanging in the tree, and he plunges all 3 of these javelins into the heart of Absalom while he was still alive in the oak tree. This is very dramatic, because there are so many options as to what's going on. Did Joab say anything to Absalom? Did he look Absalom in the eye and say, you fool, I cannot believe you did this to your father? Remember, Joab was the one, whether he was tricked or his heartfelt desire was to bring David comfort, he found a way to bring Joab back to the city. And even though he knew Joab didn't have any authority and he didn't go when Joab called him, he had done something for Joab. He had given Joab an opportunity to live with his family again, to have the wealth that was given to him by being a royal member of the royal family. He had done a lot for Absalom. And Absalom, in essence, thanked him by following Abishai and taking over the kingdom. So Absalom might have seen this coming. Joab might have said to him some things. I don't know what, though. I mean, if I was making a movie, I don't know which is more dramatic, to have a little monologue, or Joab's like, you rebellious, arrogant fool. You had the whole kingdom at your disposal and you chose to, destroy it. You chose to destroy your father or whatever. I don't know. Or does he just look at him in his everything spoken without saying a word? And he doesn't make him suffer. He goes right for the heart. He kills him immediately. And he puts all 3 javelins in there. And then it says the 10 men that surrounded Joab. They stood in a circle around Absalom, and they also struck him and killed him. Now, why would they do that? They did that because they knew that they didn't want Joab to receive they didn't want Joab to be the only one responsible for the death of the king's son. They did this because they had sworn allegiance to Joab. They had sworn to protect Joab at all costs. So they in essence were saying, listen, Joab, if you get put to death for this, we'll get put to death for this. So Joab puts, the initial javelin into the heart of Absalom while he's hanging there in the tree. And while he's bleeding out, the other men come and they stab him. And Joab continues to put all 3 javelins into Absalom's heart. The other men stab him, cut him, throw, maybe shoot an arrow into him. There's no way Absalom gets out of this alive. And ideally, in their minds, there's no way to nail this down to just one person who killed Absalom. We're gonna spread the responsibility out and possibly give us all a way out. So when Absalom is dead, Joab has the trumpet sounded, and all the troops stop pursuing the other army, and all of them are basically fleeing for their homes. Like they hear that the sound of retreat calling off the battle, and they all know they are free to go. Their leadership is gone. There's already rumors that Absalom is dead. Word is getting out that people saw that he was dead. I'm guessing if Joab did his job right, he made sure that Absalom was seen dead. He buried him literally right there. He threw him into a big pit in the forest and piled a heap of rocks on top of him. He wanted to make sure that this royal feud was over, that there was no way for David to resurrect this feud again. Because like I said, I don't know if this was this was probably strategy as well as personal. Because he saw how David was when Absalom was in exile. He saw how much David mourned for him, longed for him, wanted his son close to him again. And he thought, if I let this guy live, David's going to find a way to give this guy some sort of role in the family again, and he's just going to cause trouble. He constantly causes trouble. Joab had, he recognized the cunning politics that had been going on for years. He probably was somewhat embarrassed that he didn't see it coming sooner. He probably felt some responsibility for this battle even taking place, because if he had been paying closer attention to what Absalom was doing, he would have put an end to it. Remember, this is Absalom who lit Joab's field on fire so that Joab would come and see him. He manipulated Joab to give him the authority that he didn't have anymore when he came back from exile. He knew what he was doing. Joab should have seen this coming, and I think all of that is wrapped up in the fact that he kills Absalom and he throws him in a pit and buries him with rocks and calls it a day. Now we have to get the information back to David. Remember, he's a couple miles away. And so Amahazi, son of Zadok. So this is one of the priest's sons, which is interesting, as always, right? He's one of the runners who brought the initial information about Absalom's plans from his father, who got it from Hushi and the servant girl. Remember, Hushi told the servant girl. Hushi told Zadok. Zadok told the servant girl. Servant girl tells Jonathan, and Ahimahaz, and da 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 da. So he's an important messenger. He's a runner. He's like, let me run and take the news to the king that the Lord has vindicated him by delivering him from the hand of his enemies. And Joab says, you are not going to do that today. You can take the news some other time. You can be a runner some other time. And not today, because the king's son is dead. Now, why would he do this? Well, he's seen what happens when you bring news to David that a king is dead. Remember the Amalekite, right, that brought the news to David that Saul was dead? He brought the wrist bands and the crown. He's like, David, the man who's been pursuing you for all these years, the one who's been trying to kill you for all these years, is finally dead. Da 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 da. And David's like, how dare you bring me such horrible news? And he kills him. Not a good reaction. And then you remember David did the same thing to the two guys who went in and killed Saul's son, who had set up his kingdom in the northern part of the country, right? David was at Hebron. In the southern part of the country, this guy set up his own kingdom under his uncle Ahab. Ahab, I think. No, is it Abner? Sorry, he set it up under Abner, and they kill him in his sleep. Remember, they go seek into the palace. They were traders, well, they were traders technically, but they were also merchants. And they went in, they were raiders, sorry. They'd go in for supplies, and then they'd leave and go raid other countries and bring the bounty back to their king. Well, they just walked into the palace while he's napping. They kill him in his sleep. They go and tell David. What's David do? He kills them. Joab's thinking, listen, I can't send Zadok's son to the king to tell him that Absalom's dead. He'll kill him. I can't risk it. Like, you're too valuable. You're the son of a high priest. You're a great kid. I really like you. You're a fabulous runner, by the way. I'll give you news to take to David some other time, but not this time. And he looks around and he sees a Cushite, which evidently has something to do with where they were from. And he says, go tell the king what you have seen. So he's just another runner. So the Cushite bows down before Joab and runs off. Then Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, he goes to Joab, but he says, come what may, please let me run behind the Cushite. And he says, listen, why do you want to go? You don't have any news that will bring you any reward. Trust me, if you go tell David that Absalom's dead, you're going to get punished for that. Like, it's not going to end well. This is not a good plan. Why do you want to go? What is it about it? And Joab's son, Zadok's son looks at him. He says, come what may, I want to run. He's like, I don't care what happens. I want to bring the news. So there was something probably intuitive in Zadok's son, that he loved the opportunity to bring word of victory. He wanted the opportunity to stand before the king. He was a messenger. This was not a role he took lightly. It wasn't a flippant thing like, Oh, you're like, you'll just be a messenger. Messengers, they were so highly trusted because the information they brought had to be true. And ideally as unfiltered with their personal opinions as possible. And when you're bringing news of a battle to a king who isn't in the battle, and especially to a king like David who understands battle, like there was a lot of positive stuff, and Zadok's son really wanted to go. So Joab says, he gives in. He's like, all right, fine, go. Bring him news. And off he goes. Now they both runners go different ways. The Cushite or Ethiopian, he takes the shorter route, much more difficult, probably up and down really steep ravines, but it's not as far. Zadok's son takes a much longer route, but it's through the plains, which means he can run at a steady pace. So this is kind of like a mini marathon. It's like not a marathon because it's only like 3 miles, but it's a longer way, probably more dusty. You're tired already. You've been in battle. And they both are showing up almost at the same time, even though the Ethiopian or Cushite had the shorter route and the head start. So while David's sitting there between the inner and outer gates, so he's just probably pacing, wondering what's happening. A watchman's on the roof of the gateway of the wall. He looks out. He sees a man running alone. And he goes, runner coming. And David said, is he alone? Because if he's alone, he has good news. And so basically, just for what it's worth, like if the battle was going bad and a runner was bringing news of retreat, there was usually guys not far behind him. If Joab was sending like a message back, like, hey, tell David we're being defeated, we're in retreat, like there would have been a dust cloud behind the runner. So David knows if he's all by himself, just running out there toward the city, it's good news. And then the watchman saw another runner. Look, another man is running alone. 2 runners. David said, wow, he must be bringing good news too. Now this is interesting because the watchman says, it looks to me like the first one runs like the son of Zadok. So I don't know what style that is, but I have been a runner. I ran track. I ran cross country. I don't run now. My body breaks down too quickly, but I do know that runners have distinctive styles. And if you watch running, if you watch whether it's marathons or sprints, you can see it. The way the arms move, the way the legs move, how high the knees go, how far the kick is, where the chest is positioned, how the head is positioned. I mean, a very distinctive runner in my lifetime when I was a kid, a guy named Michael Johnson. Oh, my word. You know, at the time, he was just breaking all these world records and Olympic records in the 400 meters. Uncanny how quickly he could run. But he had a very distinctive style, very straight up style. And then there was another guy named Edwin Moses. He ran the 400 hurdles. Unbelievable style. Amazing. So smooth. Like this guy would go over hurdles, and if you didn't know there was a hurdle in his lane, like from the wide shots, on a wide shot watching Edwin Moses run, you could be easily fooled into thinking he's the only guy without any hurdles in his lane, because you couldn't even tell he was going over things. So there was something distinctive about the running of Zadok's son, and he was such a known messenger, a known runner, a trusted man, that he had done it so many times that the watchman, who evidently was somebody who knew David and probably came with him from the palace when David left the city, because he knew the running of Zadok's son. And he's like, it looks like Zadok's son. And David says, whoa, he's a good man. He would come with good news. And Zadok's son comes running in, and he calls out to the king, all is well. And he bowed down before the king with his face to the ground. He's like, praise be the Lord your God. He has delivered up those who had lifted up their hands against the Lord my king. Now, this is great news. Everybody around David is clapping. They're probably, sigh of relief. Like, yes, we can go home to Jerusalem. This is going to be amazing. Like, the wives were like giddy. Everybody's happy. This is good. And David's first question is, that young man, is my son Absalom safe? And Zadok says, there was a lot of confusion, just as Joab was about to send the king's servant and me, but I don't know what it was. Wow. Is that called a lie? At the very least, he omits some information here that he clearly knew. Everybody knew Absalom was dead. He's just like, yeah, there was a lot of confusion. I was sent just as I was being sent with the message. I'm not sure exactly what happened. And the king said, well, then wait here, because he knows that there's another messenger very close. And the Ethiopian, or the Cushite, arrives, and he says, my lord the king, hear the good news. The Lord has vindicated you today by delivering you from the hand of all those who rose up against you. And the king says to the Cushite, how is the young man Absalom? Is he safe? And he says, may the enemies of my lord the king and all those who rise up to harm him be like that young man. So, in other words, he's dead. He flowers up the whole message. He tries to make it clear, like, listen, what happened to him, I hope happens to everybody who rises up against you, because you are an amazing, and like, all of this is flattery, all of this is honoring, all of this is truth from the Cushite's point of view. David, you're the only king, and this kid rose up against you and he tried to overthrow you, and I hope everyone who tries to do that dies, just like he did. Now, maybe Zadok's son didn't deliver that information because of the warning that Joab had given him in the woods, which was basically, David kills everybody who tells him that a king is dead. David doesn't like it when his enemies are murdered. You tell David that Absalom's dead, there's a good chance you don't make it out alive. Matter of fact, so far it's 100% you don't make it out alive. Which goes to the heart of God in David. David didn't want his enemies to die. God doesn't want his enemies to die. You said what? God destroys his enemies. He does. Yeah, his enemies do get wiped out, but not the people. The enemy's plans are put asunder. The enemy's plans are laughed at by God. But he doesn't destroy them. He doesn't kill them. And that's what I think I see when I read this story. David's heart is not for his enemies to be dead. He wants them to be in a position to receive the blessings of God. He wants them to understand the love of God, the acceptance of God, the resurrecting power of relationship that God has. And maybe because of all that, Zadok's son doesn't tell David that Absalom is dead. But in this case, he doesn't wipe out the Cushite. It says the king is shaken. And he goes up into his room over the gateway. So he took a position in the city that literally overlooks the entrance of the city. And he began to cry, and he cried out. He said, my son Absalom, my son Absalom. If only I had died instead of you. This was a devastating blow to David. And we'll the mourning that he goes into over the loss of his son is probably more so reflective of the sense of loss he had as a father to Absalom. He lost the opportunity to be all that David could have been to him. So you can kind of imagine that those who were relieved, the family members that were there around the city gate, the troops that were set there in case of retreat, and they had to protect David against overwhelming odds. The sense of relief and excitement that they had of victory, the idea that now they can go back home, everything can be as it was, all of that starts to be stolen. All of that sense of excitement begins to shift because David is crying out. And he's crying out in a place where they would hear him, because his room, his balcony, his voice would have flown right over the top of the city gate. And this is where David is, and this is what David is doing as the men who are back in the forest with Joab, right? They had gathered. The two runners are gone. The men have regrouped. They've looked at their victory. They've counted their losses. They did amazingly well. They did some recon. No one's regathering. There's no central command post. Absalom, of course, is dead. Everybody else is on the run, basically, because now that they've lost this, everybody, all the troops know, if I get caught, I'm the traitor, because David is now king again. Like, this could go really bad for all of us, and all of them know that. So they're running, they're scattered, they've dropped whatever weapons they have. They don't want to be seen as a threat to David's army. They're done, they're gone, and these guys are like, hey, let's go back to the city. And this is where they find David. This is where David is. He's crying and mourning the loss of his son. And that's where we're going to pick up the story next week in chapter 19, because life is not that simple now that he's won the battle. And often that happens for a lot of people, right? You win the battle, you have a great experience. It's like, yes, I've defeated the enemy. And then your life gets super complicated. We'll talk about that next week on The Epic Narrative.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to this podcast on any platform you use. You can also reach out to Bob for questions or booking at thebobswitzer.com or email him at thebobswitzer@gmail.com. See you next week, guys.